Okay, so welcome everyone. This is Internet Safety 101 Strategies and Tips to be more secure online. I am Grant McGaw. I'm the program chair of South Florida HIMSS, and I want to welcome everyone to today's seminar. Before we get started, we're just going to do a little housekeeping. Because this is a virtual platform and we're simulating it as a actual physical seminar, we encourage everyone to turn on their cameras, give an opportunity to do a little networking so you can see who's in the room and who's not. I encourage you to also share in the chat. That's why it's there, to have some communications, with our panelists as well as all attendees. And one of the best practices that we've done at South Florida HIMSS that's worked very well is go ahead and drop your LinkedIn profile link. So if there's people out there that you want to get in touch with after the webinar, it's a great way to do that. So for today's agenda, we're going to have a keynote speaker from Dell Lifesciences first, and then we'll have a panelist discussion with special guests from Texas Hospital Association, Genesiscare, and the FBI. After which we will have an audience Q&A and then a wrap-up. So with that said, I would like to introduce to you our South Florida president, Mr. Oscar Perez.
Thank you, Grant, and welcome everybody. We're excited for today's presentation, and thank you for joining us here today. As Grant mentioned, I'm Oscar Perez. I'm the president of South Florida HIMSS, and I'm also the vice president at Memorial Healthcare System. And we've got, again, a great group of panelists today to talk to you a little bit about security, which is a very important topic for everybody, both in your professional and personal lives. And this being Cybersecurity Month, it's very appropriate to be talking about this topic. But before I handed it back up to them, I just wanted to say, South Florida HIMSS is a local chapter here in South Florida. We try to bring you guys great events and educational events to our community. If you guys want to participate and if you're not a member, please become a member. And if you'd like to participate in any of our committees and get more involved, you'll see some links here up on the screen for you to do so. We also wanted to thank our sponsors, Nutanix, KPMG, and Dell Technologies. Without them, we wouldn't be able to bring these great events to you guys at no cost. And so we really appreciate their support. And again, you guys came here to hear some of our security experts talk a little bit about security and keeping us safe online. And I'm here at the Security Operations Center in a bunker. So I'm going to hand it back up to Grant to kick it back off. Grant, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that, I muted. We're going to say thanks, Oscar. This week is Global Health Equity Week. The entire week we want to bring awareness as HIMSS to some of the health disparities that are in the community, whether they're locally or nationally, and we're doing a virtual march. So by going to I think there's a link in our website, we might be able to put that into the chat at some point, that you can actually let your elected officials know about how you would like to support our healthy communities and move the agenda forward, so we have a voice in that respect. So with that said, I'd like to bring up our moderator for today's event, Sanjay Diallo from 24/7.
Hey, good morning. I guess thanks for HIMSS for putting this together and getting the panel together. We have a great panel. Before we start off with the panel, I'm going to hand it over to Jim Shook. Jim is going to basically, being the practice leader at Dell, he's going to share some of the wisdom. And so, Jim, if you want to do a quick intro and basically take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjay. And I want to thank everybody for the time today. On behalf of our Dell team, we have a lot of people dedicated in this area, and they gave me the opportunity to present to this group. Kevin McKittrick, I know you're on. For everybody else on the call here, Kevin's one of our leaders in this space, and I know people are exchanging LinkedIn on the chat. Contact Kevin. He's been terrific leader for us in this space. So what we're going to talk about today is ransomware and destruction. My practice I founded about 5 years ago, and I'm actually global and across all industries, but I spend a lot of time in healthcare for obvious reasons. It's a very important space for us. What we deal with on a daily basis is helping organizations protect, understand, and comply with regulations related to these destructive and ransomware attacks. So I think people are pretty much in the know now. These attacks are pretty devastating. They cost a lot of money. They hit across all size organizations in all industries. It doesn't really matter, and they're just in the news. I know hospitals and healthcare tend to be a bigger target for a lot of reasons that we don't need to go into today, but it's a big focus for a lot of organizations. I won't spend time going through this because I want to get to our use case, but somebody in our organization sent this to me a while ago. I thought it was interesting because it really provided a few more details on what these attacks look like on a clinic or a healthcare organization or a hospital, what happens, how long it takes to get back, the fact that people are heroic in being able to continue to treat patients even when their systems are down, but it's not an ideal situation. I think we'll be sending these decks out. It might be some additional reading for you if you're interested in that. Here's our focus, and if you joined a little bit early, we were just celebrating a little bit with Agent Abelard from the FBI for a big indictment of a whole bunch of Russian hackers who have been causing problems for several years. Don't know that we'll ever get to arrest them because they probably won't leave the country, but that's part of the point there. And it pointed out to me again that we have to look across the full spectrum of threat actors, warfare, insiders, people who are ideologically motivated instead of financially motivated, insiders, and all those other areas. So as you look at your strategy, make sure you're considering kind of all the threats that are out there. And so what I wanted to do is just kind of present a quick use case representative of what we're seeing. I don't want to implicate anybody in particular. We don't do that, but this is very similar to a lot of attacks that are happening today. We'll talk about what the threat actors are doing and some of the things that you can do to harden against that. So very simple here. We've got a data center on the left. You've got your production environment that's running all of your critical applications. You're backing that data up in that data center. You may or may not have a second site on how you operate. So if you do, you may have additional production equipment there. You may be replicating on a hot or hot warm basis, but you're replicating from production. You may have a replicated backup there. There's all kinds of different things that you could be doing here. So just kind of representative for what we frequently see. So enter our cyber attacker. Now, threat actors are getting into environments through a lot of different ways. We're seeing a lot of phishing emails. Sometimes it's spear phishing, which means they're going after a particular person, and they're actually using machine learning and AI to help craft those emails to make them even better. There's still RDP exploits. There's lots of ways the threat actors can get in, but once they're in, they're typically laying low for a while. You'll hear the term dwell time, which is the time from which they get in until they're actually discovered, which, depending on who you ask, can be 60 days to 120 days. For the ransomware and destructive attacks that we see, they usually only need about 10 days to 2 weeks of time to really unroll what they're doing. So what they're doing is they are getting in and escalating privileges. They're grabbing passwords. They're mapping out the network. They have a lot of different tools to help them do that work, but they're typically not exposing themselves. They're not going after your data. They're not planting malware until later. So this is that phase where they're just gathering information. One of the other things I wanted to mention in terms of how they're getting in, really interesting story came out a few weeks ago. Again, lots of publicity for the FBI today. There was a ransomware group out of Russia that targeted an IT employee that worked for Tesla. And they offered him $1 million to help them compromise the Tesla network. He just had to go in and plant some malware. To his credit, he did not. He went to the FBI. They ended up capturing and indicting them. But those are other kind of threat vectors in terms of how people might be getting into the network. So what do they do after they gather these credentials? The basic attack, and thinking back to my previous slide, the kind of low-level criminals, they will deploy ransomware that will encrypt production systems. And then they'll send you a ransom note and say, you've got to pay us. Well, a lot of our customers think, we have a DR plan. Why can't we use that in this type of a case? And you can't, because it's a different purpose. Disaster recovery is there. We're replicating data to a second site in case we lose the first site. Operational problems, things like that. In a cyber attack, that data in production gets encrypted or corrupted or potentially deleted, and that's what we replicate. So now we're losing the second site immediately within minutes, and we see this again and again. So you can't count on your DR plan for this purpose. It's a different thing, but you can use a lot of the concepts there. You just need to be prepared to do other things. Now, one of those things is backup. So if we have a backup at production, like I showed you here, maybe we can use that to recover, because we're losing production data, and that's kind of the reason we have backup. Well, the issue there is that the bad guys know that too. The backups can be difficult to secure. So there's a lot of points of vulnerability. We see mostly the threat actors gathering passwords, and they become super administrators. So when they unroll their attack and they encrypt the production data, frequently they're logging into the backups as an administrator, and they're deleting them, they're corrupting the catalogs, they might be encrypting the data. If you have data in the cloud, they can log in there, delete that data. Sometimes we've even seen them, and this is indicative of what they do all the time, they're so creative, they'll log into the cloud copy and they'll recover it to their systems. So now they've got a copy of all of your stuff. And so those are things that you have to be concerned about, the outcome of which is encryption of production data, deletion of backup data can leave you with nothing. So if you look at a lot of the attacks that have been reported lately, and again, I'm not going to call anybody out, this is really clear in the news, organizations are losing their backups in addition to their production data. So what do you do? So there's a lot of different things. One of the things that we've talked about a lot is to create a vault, an air-gapped copy of your data, not all of your data, but your most critical systems. And that vault is offline. You can securely update data into that vault. And so it's secure then if the bad actors come in and they get access over here, a properly architected vault won't let them have access. There's also protections against insiders. There's locking of data in case somebody does get into the vault. It's an additional layer of protection. And then analytics that help you to understand that your data is okay. So for analytics, they're really interesting in that we're not looking for malware like we would do in production and like you probably do with your SIEMs and other capabilities, endpoint protection. We're actually looking at the data and the applications. Have they been changed in a manner that would enable you to not use them for recovery? So this type of process happens automatically. If you lose a production data center, you can go into the vault and use just normal recovery procedures to get that data back and get back up and running as quickly and safely as possible. So that's kind of our high level there. What makes up a good vault? So there's a lot of different characteristics. We've put this together based on the 5 years that we've been working on in this space. You know, you can start with things that are good. Let's harden that backup. Let's make the data immutable so that it's harder to delete. And yes, I know I use the term immutable, and I said harder to delete. It's not impossible. There's always attacks on these things. If you make your data immutable in your production environment, if it's accessible, the bad guys know how to attack it. They may not be successful, but they'll change the clock. They will attack the platform. There's a whole bunch of different things. So we think of that immutability as a great starting point, but it's not going to get you to the finish line. When you move into better things like creating some physical isolation, requiring capabilities, not just multi-factor, but two people acting together. So biometric locks with a key on it too for certain systems so they can't access those systems. Those are just some ideas there. And then as you get into best, really an air gap is one of the best controls that's out there. We're seeing that again and again in the regulatory guidance that we get in financial industry, as well as some of the information that's come out from FBI and then some of the HHS and OCC guidance that we've seen talking about offline and inaccessible air gap data. The analytics we think are useful too. Let's make sure we're protecting the data. Let's make sure that we know it's good. So let's analyze that data and then, of course, be ready to recover. We need to understand if production gets hit, what are the procedures we're going to use to get all that data back. A great place to start, your critical rebuild material. So I know I talked about the systems, the applications that you have, in healthcare, the electronic medical record, the scans, the data that we have, patient data, but billing's important. But even beneath that, what IT systems do we need? We need DNS, we need AD. Those are frequent targets in a really bad attack. Put those into a vault, make sure you've got them. My security teams love the idea of putting their firewall rules in there. All those things kind of add up. We've got a lot of additional resources, so I know we'll send this out, some links here, some white papers, some other information that might be useful for you, but just wanted to walk you through that use case, maybe set up our discussion a little bit. So thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to our discussion here and then possibility of having our Dell team follow up with you at some point.
Jim, thank you so much.
Thank you,
This was
Sanjay.
very insightful. Very insightful. I guess from here, we will head on to our panel. Our today's panel actually consists of some cybersecurity experts, including Jim himself. First of all, I've got Cherise Abelard from FBI. I have Fernando Martinez from Texas Hospital Association. Mauricio Angie, he's coming from Genesiscare. And Jim, and the easy way maybe is I'm going to turn it over to Cherise. If you can introduce yourself, 1 or 2 minutes, each of you, and then we can jump on to the questions. I guess in the introduction, if you can talk about especially what do you do and what your thoughts are on cybersecurity, especially the topic being cybersecurity 101, what would your pearls of wisdom be for the audience who's on the call?
Good afternoon. My name is Cherise Abelard, and I am a special agent with the FBI out of the Miami division. My background a little bit, I'm a recovering attorney before I joined the Bureau, but I've been working both white collar and cyber violations for the past 8 years. I'm embedded on a squad that has a cyber task force, and we basically work criminal cyber violations, including intrusion, hacking, business email compromises, and several other violations as well. As far as any words of wisdom for the audience, I would just say that the landscape of cybersecurity is ever evolving, and in the law enforcement space, we see it every day. These actors, unfortunately, they tend to have forward thinking, and they're always creative in their attacks. You have to be aggressive, not only on your security and creating vaults, as Jim suggested, but you also have to be just as vitally aggressive about education, which I think is the #1 thing. And thank you for everyone participating, because that's the #1 defense, I think, against cyber actors. The more you know, the more you can protect yourself, and the more you train others, you can protect your businesses, your companies, and even your personal information, which is one of the things that they attack the most. In my situation, you see all kinds of things, scams, you see all kinds of impacts this can have, and it's very severe to not only companies, but to people and individuals. So you just have to be very vigilant about protecting your information and about sharing that with others, elders, and younger people as well.
Great, thank you, Cherise. I'm gonna head over to Fernando. Fernando, welcome. If you can give a quick introduction. Fernando comes from Texas Hospital Association and has been in cybersecurity for a very, very long time. He mentors a number of us in the cybersecurity community. So Fernando, thanks for joining.
Shanti, thank you very much. Pleasure and honor to be here with such an esteemed group of individuals, and looking forward to the discussion. To my friends, many of whom I see are on the call, good to be with all of you. To those of you that don't know me, I've spent my 40+ year career in the healthcare sector, working with hospitals, first in the areas of finance, and then the last couple of decades working as a hospital or system CIO or CTO or CSO, whatever the job called for. For the last 6 years, I've been working in Austin, Texas for the Texas Hospital Association, which is a nonprofit trade association that advocates for acute care hospitals in Texas. In that organization, I serve as the corporate senior vice president and chief strategy officer, and I get to work with over 450 acute care hospitals in Texas in every sector of healthcare. A tremendous opportunity to network with hundreds of my peer CIOs and to advance technology in Texas. In addition to my daytime job, I serve as an adjunct professor for executive graduate programs at FIU's Chapman School of Business, where I teach sections in the healthcare MBA program as well as the MSIS program. We just concluded a section on cybersecurity. The MSIS program at FIU recently started a cybersecurity specialization, and we had a very successful term. I'm excited about the work that they're doing. Lastly, I'm an APGM certified international instructor for ISACA, for the Information Systems Auditing and Security Association. Through the South Florida chapter of ISACA, of the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, I regularly conduct training sessions for candidates for the CISM certification, for the Certified Information Security Manager certification, and also the CISA credential, the Certified Information Systems Auditor credential. So again, it's a pleasure to be here. My little bit of wisdom that I would start out with is to say, the more the circumstances we operate in change, the more we need to go back to basics. It's the basic block and tackle discipline that helps us get past the crisis. So again, looking forward to the discussion and really appreciative of being here today.
Thank you, Fernando. Mauricio, thank you so much for joining. Mauricio is the newly minted Chief Security Officer for Genesiscare. And I'll let Mauricio introduce himself, his storied career all the way from NASA to Universal Studios to a number of banks and now to one of the largest healthcare institutions. So Mauricio, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Sanjay. That was the presentation. You said it all. Appreciate it. So I'm happy to be here in supporting the local chapter of HIMSS. Like Fernando said, we both, besides being the CISO and coming from Mount Sinai Medical Center as a previous CISO, I also am a professor at FIU in a number of schools, School of Computer and Information Systems, the Chapman School of Business, and also the School of International Public Affairs. All cybersecurity, and Fernando and I have been putting together the programs and helping. I'm also the past president for your local InfraGard chapter, which I'm happy, board member, continue to support the FBI, the public and private sectors. And I welcome everybody to please join InfraGard and continue to support the FBI and the efforts of that they have into protecting us and the critical infrastructure. Thank you, Sanjay. Oh, by the way, I forgot to say, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Very good. I love the Security 101 connotation of this panel, and looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you, Mauricio. Jim, you want to add a few words about your background? I know you did a great presentation, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'll be brief, and I'm really happy to be here with everybody, especially this panel is fantastic. I practiced law for a long time, so like Sharice, I wouldn't call myself a recovering lawyer, I'm unrecovered, but going way back, I've been doing things with computers and cybersecurity since I was a kid. So the opportunity to do those things together at EMC and now with Dell has been great, and really appreciate the time that we get with our customers to bring those things together. So look forward to our discussion.
Awesome, thank you, Jim. So the chat panel is open. If you folks have any questions, please post your questions as we go along. We will take the questions towards the end. But the panel that we have gathered over here, basically from topics ranging from human factors, social engineering, organizational resilience, cyber risk management, awareness and training, ransomware. So we're going to touch upon a number of topics, not just one topic, and all of these topics with a background of healthcare. So I'm going to start with Charisse, with all of this COVID that's going on, right? The digital transformation that was planned out for the next 3 years. We basically got this done in 3 months flat, right? When in March we declared pandemic, all the companies, all the hospitals, all the healthcare institutions had to basically ramp up their cyber programs, IT security, access to important information in the EMRs, not only from within the hospital systems, but from home. And so there was a huge impact on the workforce. So what impact does the human factor have on the success of cyber attacks? What is FBI seeing in that matter? You're on mute.
Yes, I'm unmuted. Yes, thank you so much. And yes, with COVID and with everyone teleworking, and as you have Jim even discussed briefly in his presentation, the human factor is one of these things that you can't actually create a system or vault to prevent. If you have individuals within that vault that are not secure, then that definitely puts a damper on your security protocol. We all make mistakes. We are only human, but that's unfortunately the problem. Human error is the leading cause of data and security breaches. It's responsible for over 52% of incidents. People are lured through phishing campaigns, through social engineering, through business email compromises, and all their kind of techniques. We know that the Democratic National Committee was hacked, and that was as a result of a spear phishing effort related to that human factor. According to our records, currently there's $2.3 billion that has cost organizations since 2013 as a result of this human factor element. And that's a 270% increase since January 2015 alone. And again, our Internet Crime Complaint Center, where we intake complaints from internet crimes, there was a rise to 1,783 complaints just last year. It's no longer enough just to secure your infrastructure, but you have to train your people. And again, with the teleworking and the environment we're working in today, that's even more critical to the success of any program or protocol. What you can do as any kind of industry to help create some hedgeway in this area is to also take a look at information security training and awareness at your different institutions. Provide immersive learning opportunities and reinforce behavior change. A culture of communication from the top down. I know it's sometimes difficult from the private sector to get executive management to understand the risks and to invest in training, but that is paramount to securing your systems and securing your businesses as well from these threats. Again, another thing that's crucial, and I think Mauricio for mentioning this, is partnering with law enforcement. I know a lot of individuals and companies, they look to the FBI when something has happened. But what is really crucial is having these relationships established and working with us beforehand. So when something does happen, unfortunately, if it does, we're able to work aggressively and have a strategy intact. Part of the plan can also be including those individuals or those groups from the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, how you will communicate things to them, when you will, where in the process, and having those key individuals already identified ahead of time and working together. It's also a conduit of information. As Mauricio mentioned, InfraGard is one of our private sector relationships with the FBI, but we exchange information. We have many flash and pins and other information that we exchange, and that is crucial, again, to helping build the infrastructure, but also making the company and individuals aware of what the threats are, what we're seeing. It changes so rapidly. It's just a way to have that open communication and the feeding back and forth, which I think is critical. So those things are what I would recommend as far as what the human factor, the impact it can have, but how you can try to mitigate that in the environment we're living in today.
Excellent. Thank you, Charisse. Fernando, I'm going to come to you and talk about organizational resilience vis-a-vis human factors. But before I come to you, Mauricio, she called upon you twice, one in the matter of FBI and InfraGard. Do you care, being the past president of the InfraGard chapter, being from healthcare, would you care to comment on the benefits of joining InfraGard, the benefits you reaped, or you still reap being a member of the InfraGard community?
Sanjay, as S.A. Avalar is talking, I couldn't, I mute my mic. yes, this is refreshing to see how much effort we put through the years in partnership with the FBI. And something I was taking notes here, and I always say it, probably you hear me saying this over and over again. It's better to know your FBI agent, who's assigned to you, what field agents and cyber agents before an incident happened, because when you know them personally, you can, in your incident response, like S.A. Abelard said, you have the name and number to call and not struggling to call the 1-800 line to report one of these 17 complaints, which goes somewhere, right? I personally think, Sanjay, that you and Sanjay is a member of the board of InfraGard. We've gone through a lot, and we've done an excellent job into getting the organizations, calling upon CISOs and CIOs to come to the table and talk to the FBI and talk to InfraGard. Through InfraGard, we've done critical infrastructure talks, and we've gone through a lot of exercises at the headquarters too. So one interesting thing, Sanjay, the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month this year, the slogan is, if you connected, protected. And it couldn't be any closer to what S.A. Abelard is talking about, is know your responsibilities as you connect to the internet are. When you're driving your car, you know you're responsible and you got to be a good citizen. So we're asking the same thing, right? 2 years ago in 2015, the slogan was think before you connect, and it's evolving. I thought you were going to talk to me about S.A. Abelard. My doctorate degree is all about behavior analysis and the human factor. So we can speak about this in nutshell. But Sanjay, very good segue into what's going on these days with the human factor.
Excellent. Mauricio, thank you so much. For all the participants in the audience, what we are talking over here is InfraGard. InfraGard is a public-private partnership with FBI, and everybody is welcome to join. And one of the big benefits of joining InfraGard is that you get access to information before everybody gets access to that information. If you behave well and if you build relationships, you can get the phone numbers of some of the local agents and special agents, so that like Mauricio said, if you have an incident at your workplace, you can actually pick up the phone now. You can pick up the phone and call a portal called IC3 internetcrimecenter.gov. You can pick up the phone and call them, and they basically route the information down to Special Agent Abelard, or if you behave well, if you build a good relationship, she may take your call and she may help you right away. So those are the benefits of being part of the InfraGard locally over here. Please reach out to me or Mauricio if you want more information about InfraGard, or if you want to become a member of the InfraGard. Just one caution: there will be a level 1 background check on you. So if you don't want to share what you've done in the past, just be careful. Having said that, I'm gonna switch over to Fernando. Fernando, we talked about human factors, we talked about COVID-19, we talked about digital transformation. How does that impact the organization? How does the organizational resilience come into play with so much transformation and direct impact on the workforce?
Well, Sanjay, before I jump into that, let me just add to the comment. So when I started working in Austin, Texas, the first thing I did was I joined the Austin chapter of InfraGard. InfraGard has local chapters all over the country. And, just to lend my voice to the voices you've heard so far, InfraGard is a great organization to be involved with, not only for the reasons already stated, but because it also gives you an opportunity to network with your peers. You'd be surprised how many of your peers are already part of that network. And just like we have regular meetings for other associations, they meet on a, if not regular basis, on a infrequent basis, but they meet, and oftentimes it's the hot topics that get discussed. So certainly encourage everyone, if you don't know or have not gotten information, take the time to reach out to Mauricio, to Sanjay, make the connections, have those conversations. It's a worthwhile pursuit. So to your question, Sanjay, organizational resilience, I think that's an area that we probably don't focus on as much as we should. And I don't mean to be judgmental in saying that. We tend to, as technologists, oftentimes we tend to be looking at, you know, the store window at what's the new shiny object that we can buy. And what I suggest and what I propose here to the audience is that a lot of what we can and should do is based on our behavior, not necessarily the next new tool or solution that's out there to buy. Let me be very specific. So for example, with the advent of COVID, a lot of organizations with mature security leaders have well-designed security controls in place. That's why you have secure, credentialed security professionals running the security programs for organizations. But when COVID came around, for example, one of the simplest controls that we all have in our organizations is some sort of a vulnerability scanning / patch management program that we use to ensure that our systems, that our workstations, that our workforce, that our environment is properly protected and patched, because we still see regularly, I remember in the last month, there's been a couple of bulletins about this large number of Exchange servers that when you scan the internet still are largely unpatched for known vulnerabilities. So we know there's an opportunity to behave better. So in a very specific case, and again, I have the benefit of working with 450 organizations in Texas. I talk to CIOs from very large public systems, for-profit systems, to small nonprofits and rural hospitals, and everybody has very similar challenges. So for example, when COVID hit, a lot of the organizations' controls for vulnerability scanning and patch management was built around the notion that when people have their computers at work and they connect to the network, well, of course, they have in the background these jobs that are running, machines get scanned, and then patches get deployed based on whatever the protocol is for that organization. And when we sent people to work from home, a lot of organizations did not immediately go back and revisit what are the controls that are now no longer as effective based on a remote work situation. So in some organizations that I was personally involved with, there were a large number of employees that basically were not connecting via VPN back to their network because the bulk of what they needed was being accessed through an independent platform. Think of Office 365, where you have your OneDrive and you have your webmail. So you don't really need to log into the corporate network. And in a very short period of time, in just a couple of months, organizations that had a very high level of compliance with that control and the machines were patched. When we reached out and said, hey, how are you guys scanning machines if they're not getting on your network? How are you doing that? And then went back and pressed organizations to make sure that everybody VPNs in, that they connect so we can scan them. What we found was that there was a lot of organizations whose compliance rate with patch management was nowhere near what it had been before. So it's not that they don't have smart security people. It's not that they don't have mature, well-developed controls. It's that we have to be flexible enough so that when circumstances change, we think in terms of organizational resilience, and we think in terms of what do I need to do to adapt my strategy, my control environment to ensure that I continue to provide that level of protection. I realize this is a very narrow sliver, but that sliver it's very symbolic and representative of a lot of other areas that we can and should focus in the domain of organizational cyber and IT resilience. So let me pause there.
No, thank you. I'm going to come back to you in a moment. Let me go to, Jim actually did a presentation you all saw. He talked about ransomware. He talked about specifics about how to protect from ransomware. So Jim, I'm going to come to you in a second, but before I come to you, Mauricio, with your research that you're doing, what do you recommend? How do you prevent from a human behavior perspective? How do you prevent from becoming a ransomware victim? Any thoughts?
Sanjay, it's interesting. Fernando just said something that resonates in many of us, and it should be resonating to those who are participating today, is that tools cannot solve all the problems. And we go out and we let vendors tell us what we need, because that's the idea, that marketing, that's all about. You don't know that you need that until somebody tells you, right? It's shifting. It's shifting now. You have your basic walls and your basic 101. I'm gonna quote Fernando on that. Go back to basics. We're not doing a very good job in back to basics. The business demands are too fast in getting their business objectives. And where I see in the research I've been doing, the human factor, there are many areas that we're not even focusing on. We hire, buy, acquire, whatever you want to call it, tools that do cybersecurity, or we call it SEA, the Security Education, Training, and Awareness, right? These tools, we do phishing campaigns, but we're not taking time, first and foremost, because we don't have the resources sometimes, but we're not taking the time to analyze what is being effective and what is ineffective. Some of the data that I can share with you is that age gap is a factor. The older, the silver tsunami per se, are more susceptible not to understand this, jargon that we use, and not to be something called or walk into something called diffusion of responsibility. It's not me. The security guys, the IT guys have the tools. A doctor, when I was at Mount Sinai, kind of told me, and not kind of, he told me in my face, my job is not to look at these emails and learn how to not to click. That's your job. Diffusion of responsibility. Another factor is the younger generation. So the phone factor, they're not computers to them. Is, yeah, I gotta work, but my device is my phone, and in my device I can do whatever I want because I'm never gonna get infected. So you see, I just gave you that gap. But little things we can do, Sanjay, going back to really basics, right? Make it in layman's terms. Make the time to have conversations with people and personal that resonate to them. There are obviously tools that are looking at abnormal behavior, but when it comes to the humans, the culture of the organization, if the culture is a risk adverse, all that trickles down to, I am gonna stop before I click. I'm gonna look at those pointers. The other one is the commitment, effective commitment. I don't want anything to happen because I may lose my job or I'm causing harm. So there are many areas that we're studying, but the most prevalent, easiest one that the bad guys are winning right now is not even clicking on the link or open the attachment. Sanjay, I'm gonna tell you a big discovery on this study that we're doing on ransomware was the fact that if you take social media, we became the product. The product is not what you're looking at. The product is us. And so now we have accounts in all social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, you called it, Twitter. We became the product. So we're now targeted, but we don't know that we're being targeted because the products and all this is happening too fast. And that translates to, I got your information, I know where you work, I know who your peers are. Now I have a very targeted attack that I'm putting together for that network administrator that has the credentials, and I can do the damage. So more to come, Sanjay, because it's been fascinating understanding where this is going to.
Excellent, excellent. So we talked about the corporate culture. We talked about the users, right? The silver tsunami. I call them the most experienced users. I don't want to offend anybody. So the most experienced users, and the folks who don't know what a desktop is because they were born and brought up on an iPhone and an iPad, right? So we've got the two extremes over here. with all of that in mind, I think some of the things that Jim brought up on his presentations is the whole this ransomware, right? Ransomware, based on FBI's publications in the last 6 months, there are somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 successful ransomware attacks going on. This is the daily statistics, right? And so, I have been exposed to about 20 of these ransomware attacks across my clients over the last 2 years. I have successfully negotiated very large settlements. Now, with that in mind, Department of Treasury, right? Department of Treasury that actually is the quote unquote keeper of flow of money. They released a memo on October 1st. Department of Treasury basically said that if you pay ransom, Department of Treasury, Department of Justice can come and prosecute you because you may actually have paid money to state-sponsored actors that are basically working against the United States. So with that memo in mind, Jim, what do you think about that position? You're pretty much in the same position, helping companies not only build the cybersecurity platform, but help them negotiate a ransomware. So what new things go through your mind while you're sitting with the CEO and the board to pay, not to pay, to call Department of Treasury, to get the OFAC license? Share some wisdom about that.
Yeah. Sanjay, that's a great point. We've been spending a lot of time on that within the last couple of weeks, and just to take the last point first, I don't think you're going to get a license from OFAC to make the payment. So, nobody wants these ransoms to be paid. It just builds, the financial regulators are coming out a little bit more strongly on these things. So those are big concerns. I think you have to have a plan that what are you going to do short of paying the ransom? So, Mauricio and Fernando both brought up some really good points. We want to stop these things before they happen. So whether you're modeling on the NIST cybersecurity framework or high trust or the CMMC, you've got all these different categories of controls, user awareness and training. Let's keep doing that. Let's try to keep these bad actors out. We have to understand that they're going to be successful from time to time. And that's where that recover capability has to come in. What are you doing to ensure that you have some data, if the attack is successful, that you can use to recover so you don't have to pay the ransom? Nobody wants to be in that position anymore. As a lawyer, I'm concerned too, and we've talked about this with our clients. If you're publicly traded or you have shareholders, if you make that payment, I don't know whether OFAC and Department of Treasury are going to come after you or not. I think they're sympathetic and they don't want to. Are your shareholders going to do something? So those are concerns you've got too. Sit down, have that resilient strategy, whatever that looks like. It needs to map to your risk points, but be prepared for that eventuality and understand that it could happen. What are you going to do?
Jim, if I may, Sanjay, Jim, you had a good point there. I think the penalties that are coming down and the responsibility for, I think 5 or 6 years, we've been saying the board of directors is now fully responsible for cybersecurity, right? And that's when they, but you said something that also, going back to Fernando again, back to basics. I believe that ransomware attacks, they happen, and I get it. I'm on the seat. One day it's gonna happen, and I'm gonna, have to look at this. But one of the reasons that the penalties now for us paying the ransomware is that they are trying to figure out if there was willful neglect and the part of the company for setting up money to enhance the cybersecurity program. So what they're doing now, and I've been working with this agency on this, is it's a questionnaire that says, how much was the investment, all these things to when was your presentation to the board, what is your budget, to determine if there was willful neglect or it was just a matter of, bad luck. But it's coming more and more, that if we don't do the job that we were hired to do and make sure we escalate to senior leadership when needed, the fines are going to come down on us. And healthcare is well, by the way, I work for a company that acquired 21st Century Oncology in 2015. 21C, as we call it, suffered one of the largest breaches in the United States in Southeast Florida, and we just got out with a $2.2 million fine, and we're under scrutiny, right? So it is very important. Jim, good point. I like that your point.
I think a couple things to follow up on there really quickly, just to separate them out. You know, the OFAC penalty is strict liability. So it doesn't matter what your plans were. If you make a payment that winds up in the hands of a bad actor, that it doesn't matter if it was willful or neglectful or not. What Mauricio is talking about, I've actually been working with a group for a while in the Sedona conference, which is a think tank, trying to help better define what does reasonable security look like, not in the context of what makes sense from a technical standpoint, but from a legal standpoint. So Mauricio, protecting against that eventuality, what happens if you get sued? And, you know, when you think about a board of directors, for the most part, if they're discussing these issues, the business judgment rule is going to protect them. As long as they're discussing them, they have a lot of leeway, right. Budget versus risk versus all these things as they're thinking about those things. So I think, you know, having a goal, having a framework, having something you're working against, being able to convey risk. You know, when we talk about cybersecurity to the board, it's not controls, it's risk. And having those conversations are really important.
No, good point, Jim and Mauricio. I think it all goes back to the organizational intent, right? What Fernando was talking about was the resilience. You know, I'm going to come to Sharice in a second, but Fernando, you know, what kind of investment, as you consult, as you direct, as you confer with these 450 hospital systems, what kind of investment should, you know, time investment, money investment should go into this business resilience strategy that ties back to the cybersecurity strategy and IT strategy that can demonstrate to the government that there was intent of complying, there was controls in place. Share some thoughts about how you are helping the other organizations.
Certainly. So let me start by going back a second, and you know, to my peers, some of Mauricio's comments, Jim's comments. We could go down any one of those rabbit holes and spend the rest of the time talking about it. Let me add one more of those potential rabbit holes in the realm of ransomware. Having been involved in the postmortem on a number of ransomware incidents in Texas, I can tell you that one of the most poorly prepared vectors is cyber liability insurance and what you do in terms of having some sort of a cyber risk protection program in place. Some of the carriers like to have their own forensic firms. Some of the carriers like to have their own legal teams. The more you do to prepare in terms of what your response is going to be when something happens, the quicker, and to the point that was made earlier, if you're developing your plan while you're responding to an incident, it's going to be a bad day for you. And so one of the simplest things to do is to go through that process of thinking about how is it that I'm going to respond. And in my experience, if you rely strictly on the fact that you know you have a cyber liability policy or some other indemnification, I have seen multiple cases where cyber liability coverage has resulted in a payment to an organization only to have that organization approach 6-8 months later and have that reimbursement or part of it clawed back because of some other lack of preparation on the organization side, because there is an expectation that organizations are going to take reasonable steps to protect their organizations. They can't just depend on indemnification. Like I said, that's a rabbit hole that we could, you know, go down really, really deep and spend a lot of time on. I'll leave that there. But the other part, the other comment that I want to give you is that I have also seen an interesting phenomenon. We've had such stable IT operations, and you know, again, the people that are on this call, many of the people that are on this call that I know are you know, they run professional organizations, to the president of the chapter, Oscar at Memorial, Scott Judd from Jackson. I mean, you've got a lot of people that work with big organizations, and those organizations rarely have a problem. And as the digital surface, as the footprint continues to grow and our dependence on that grows, and in fact, we don't have downtime because we take steps to provide technical resilience. What I've seen in a couple of instances is that organizations that have actually lost their IT platforms, whether through a ransomware or some other technology, either an error, an omission, an attack, have to revert to manual systems, and all of a sudden nobody remembers how to do things manually. They don't go through the process of test runs doing things manually on a regular basis because we've become so dependent, and we expect, just like the dial tone, it's ubiquitous. When we pick up the house phone, dial tone is ubiquitous. And so one of the most simple things that I've seen that organizations have learned the hard way is, we got to periodically run a drill on how to take our nursing department to paper and to respond to some unforeseen outage and go to paper and go to manual. Because everything from what forms do we use to how do we get our work done, that's something that I've seen that quite frankly surprised me. Having worked in hospitals my whole life, and I guess growing up in the era where systems weren't as reliable as they are today, weren't as resilient as they are today. I guess we were better prepared back then, but that's another thing that I've observed that I thought was rather odd and very much at the doorstep, at the footstep of individuals and organizations, most simplest tactics.
Thank you, Fernando. I think that was pretty good. Cherise, do you care to add your thoughts on the things you talked about, ransomware, the Department of Treasury notification? How can a relationship, a public-private partner relationship, help a company? How can the communication become better? How can the incident response become better?
Sure, I'll give you a couple thoughts. And I first want to share just our overall strategy, because we have actually revamped that a little bit, the cyber strategy for the FBI. So our strategy is to impose risk and consequences on cyber adversaries through our unique authorities, our world-class capabilities, and our enduring partnerships. So again, I think the common theme between everyone's comments and feedback is the partnerships, how that helps. And how we typically work is that we have investigative techniques, and we have cyber agents embedded across 56 offices, field offices, as well as cyber task force. And as Jim mentioned, and as Mauricio mentioned, working with InfraGard and working with also DSA, the Domestic Security Alliance Group, which is a partnership with HSI as well, we intake complaints. We also work with partners to help mitigate threats or to take information related to threats, and we process that information. So for example, if there is a hack, let's say in a big hack for a company, we can also not only work with that partner to address the issues that are occurring, we can do some due diligence to see if it's something we've seen already and how we can mitigate it based on our experience. And this is a treasure trove of information, because we don't operate in silos at the FBI. We operate in unison as one group. So we have, like I mentioned, agents across the country. We have access to all that information at our fingertips. We have LEGATs as well. That's another big thing across the globe. These international partnerships and these agents across the globe, again, that's direct access to information into things that are occurring outside. A lot of these ransomware and BEC attacks, if you know, the money is always going to China or to other adversaries. So having those direct relationships is very impactful in trying to be successful in not only assisting and trying to understand the threat, but also if there is some kind of huge monetary payment or some wire from a BEC scam, it's been very positive as far as trying to retract the money. So we have agents and we have teams that work on that all the time, 24/7. Another thing is also, we talked about resources, which is huge, is the information sharing. We work with InfraGard and we work with also CyWatch, which is something I don't think anyone mentioned, which is a 24/7 operation center and watch floor. They provide around-the-clock support for these kinds of incidents, for BEC scams, etc. And they communicate with the field offices across across the nation. So CyWatch is something that you can call, you can reach out to them, and they're 24/7. So that's, again, another resource. If you can't reach your contact at the FBI directly, CyWatch is always there to report things. And I've worked with CyWatch on a lot of fraud kill chain requests. I don't know if anyone's done those before that have been successful, where actors wiring money across seas were able to retract that money before it's gone. So again, doing your due diligence, creating the relationships ahead of time, training, and then when something happens, being able to contact us through an InfraGard contact, through CyWatch, or through also the IC3, all those methods. I would do all of them just to try to push the issue ahead. But again, it's all about partnership. It really is about partnership and the fair exchange of information, because once we have that communication and that open space, there are things that we can do to try to assist you to our best efforts. But if you act and respond after something happens, it just puts everyone in a bad frame to be successful. So that's what I would just encourage is, again, you can even go to our website, and this information is there as well. Just look for cyber, look for our response team. You'll get the different websites where you can report crime, how to join InfraGard, the different capabilities we have. I would just educate yourself, again, ahead of time. And I think that's the best you can do to be successful in this space with law enforcement.
Thank you, Cherise. So educate yourself, culture. With all of these things, as we get closer to 1 o'clock, actually we have exceeded 1 o'clock. I think there are two more pieces left, which is sort of a short announcement by Cherise, and then handling the Q&A. So at this point in time, what I'll do is I'll try to wrap up the panel, and I'll give all of the panelists maybe 1 to 2 minutes if you want to wrap up with your thoughts, if you want to comment on some of the other things that you've heard on the call today. So I'm going to start with Fernando. Fernando, if you want to take the lead on sort of wrapping up your thoughts. And of course, as Fernando has been around, his contact information is on the chat if anybody wants to reach out to him. He's very active on LinkedIn also.
Thank you, Sanjay. Yes, well, first of all, my comments are going to be brief, certainly not going to be 2 minutes. I'll yield the rest of my time to my peers who no doubt have a lot more interesting things to say. My only reminder is that we're here for each other. The networking is an extremely important thing to do. Getting active and participating in these types of meetings is what allows you to connect with your peers. I think it's very important that we learn from each other and not keep reinventing the wheel. To your point, Sanjay, I do like to try to post on LinkedIn meaningful things that help me or that I have seen helped some of our organizational members. And so I encourage you all to stay active, pay attention to the simple things, the basic block and tackle, and work together so that we can all together have a better chance against the bad guys. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thanks, Fernando. Mauricio, you want to go next?
Sure. The theme, I like it. Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I'd like to thank HIMSS of South Florida for putting this panel together. I think it was a great information sharing. I'm all about information sharing. Just reiterate, get to know who your local resources in the cyber. It's not just the FBI. If you're in the financial services, you have the Miami Electronic Crimes Task Force. Just get to know locally. Join your ISACA, join your ISSAs. It is important that we all are in this together. One more thing in this ransomware, we forgot Jim did a great presentation, and air gap is something that we have been looking at for years at the hospital. But important to remind everyone that when you are a victim of ransomware now, it's not the fact that they're encrypting your data and asking for it. They're now extracting the data and put it in a place. So they're now saying, okay, you paid this much to to give the key to an encrypted, but also here is more money to get the data back. So interesting times. And while all this is happening, again, don't forget your basics. It's really basic. Go back to your defenses, your firewalls, do periodic assessments. Vendor management. Somebody posted How about vendor management? Important. In my top of my list, you do a good job internally, but who's connecting to you and they, what is their security posture, right? So thank you, Sanjay, and all the panelists for having me here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mauricio. Jim, you want to go next?
Yeah, that's great. And again, thanks to everybody. I'll echo all of our thanks to having this set up to the South Florida HIMSS team. A couple things, Sanjay, you brought it up too. You know, this cybersecurity is a business concern. It's not an IT concern. It impacts the business. And if you're not getting the support and the interest and the activity from the business side of the house to really establish what the risks are and then the budgets and other requirements to meet those risks, whatever they are, then you need to do so. You know, and Fernando talked about cyber policies. They're not enough. I'm happy to go into a lot of detail. Again, as a lawyer, I've litigated insurance policies before, and cyber insurance is just a different kind of insurance. So, you know, you really need to look at all those pieces from a business level standpoint to be able to address these concerns. So for us, you know, again, we're not trying to stop the ransomware attacks. We're providing some capabilities that let you recover. Those are worth looking at. And the last thing I'll say too, I'll try to get my link out there for LinkedIn. I wrote a post just a few days ago on OFAC that goes into some more detail. If you're interested in that, it's off of LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to connect with any of you. So again, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, go ahead and put your LinkedIn out on the chat. This whole OFAC issue, folks, if you are not aware of it, there is a lot of discussion about it. You know, in one of the cases that I was working on, the CEO basically was breathing down my neck. He was losing $1 million a day. And, you know, now that you have another step that I have to go to the Department of Treasury and get a license to pay that ransomware, who's covering that company's $1 million a day a loss, right? So those are some of the things that you have to actually think about. Anyway, thanks, Jim, for the feedback, and thanks for putting your LinkedIn profile on the chat. Charisse, if you want to close and also share with us some of the other trends and happenings in the healthcare field, I think a public service announcement, that'll be awesome.
No problem. Thank you. First and foremost, I'm just going to reintegrate what everyone has said as far as thanking everyone for being here. This has been a very productive and I think informative panel. I've learned something today. You always learn something new. But as well, I just wanted to re-emphasize the importance of just trying to have a plan with law enforcement ahead of time. And I just want to encourage everyone to go to our website, www.fbi.gov, and also to look out for InfoGuard and for CyWatch and for Internet Crime Center, which you can access at www.ic3.gov. That's the Internet Crime Complaint Center. But if you go to our general FBI website, you can navigate and find these resources under our cyber branch. But those things, just making yourself familiar with it, reaching out, trying to apply to be an InfoGuard member. I encourage everyone to do that as well. Just understanding what the capabilities of the FBI are and trying to partner with us and other law enforcement as well in your local areas of responsibility so that you have a plan ahead of time. Knowledge is power in this industry, as everyone knows, and the landscape is ever changing, ever evolving, and there's no way that we can all be on top of every single aspect of it, but working together, we can combat it to the best of our capabilities. Something else I wanted to mention that I think others have also talked about is just trying to encourage the individuals, the human factor, is making sure, especially in a financial or personal information realm, that individuals are double checking things, thinking twice, being more leery and weary of what they're seeing before making any kind of exchange for money or an exchange for information. I know in this society, sometimes we let our guards down when things are on email communication or on the web, but we should have the same kind of walls up, really looking at what we're receiving before and asking questions and making phone calls, which I think is hard for people nowadays. Everyone wants to just click a link. It's easier. But making a phone call to double check, is this correct? Is this the right email address? This doesn't look right. Taking those seconds to basically, question things, and having two-factor authentication, which is huge. I think all those things can be helpful as well. And again, in this landscape with COVID and this landscape with all these other things happening, it's just right now we have to be even more diligent. We're seeing a trend of increase, unfortunately, in ransomware attacks. We get complaints all the time, which is unfortunate. Small businesses, financial institutions, healthcare, which is a huge target on their back related to information PII, which is huge, not just for ransomware attacks, but also for account takeovers, for BEC, for selling the information. And there's all kind of privacy implications, as Jim mentioned too, as an attorney, if that information is shared. So I would, again, just say, get to know your local FBI, get to know what resources are there for you, integrating a plan with them, and just being aggressive about that human factor, which can really mitigate any issues you have in the future. And working together, we do the best we can every day to fight these cyber actors, but they're not going to stop coming. So we just have to build our best defense, which is the best offense.
Oh, thank you so much, Reese. There are some questions over here from the audience. Should we be documenting our relationships with third-party vendors, and our third-party vendors being required to incorporate security controls? Mauricio, you alluded to third parties and the risk assessments towards third party. Do you want to comment on the dealings, and how do you do vendor risk assessments, and how do you document your relationships with the third party?
Yeah, Sanjay, in the beginning when we started, I probably started doing vendor risk assessments back in 2012, 2013, when I was at the bank and the regulator started pushing for that. It was all manual, it was all spreadsheets, it was calling, we receive it was illegal, so it was messy. Today there are many tools that do the workflow for you, and one of the things that I find interesting is now these companies that are providing these tools are now partnering with companies like LexisNexis to do get a financial report or court filings. Amazing. And you can discover so many things. It's not just do you have a policy, you have a procedure. It is now looking at your financial, looking at if you have any pending litigation, because that makes a company vulnerable. It also looks if you have ties with, and I'm sorry, but I have to say it, but Chinese or foreign companies that are doing business or investors with you, and it's a good sign. Where is your data going? So in the vendor management program, Sanjay, it is necessary. It is one of those that you need to pay attention. And I think we woke up in 2000 when the Target breach happened, and we all said, "Oh, it was a vendor. The vendor was infected." So and I'm serious. You said, your best defense, your best, when you protect yourself is defending, and offending is better to defend. I'm sorry. I was trying to say, have your guards up to better be prepared to protect your company and yourself. Vendor management, top notch, number one. You're gonna save a lot of headaches. You're gonna see a lot of companies that do not have the necessary and I'm gonna say reasonable security controls to do business with you. You can go back and tell legal and compliance and privacy that you don't agree with this and you do not want to do business with this company. And that's what we're doing today, Sandy. We're better prepared to when we know who we're dealing with.
Thank you, Mauricio. There's another interesting question. Based on past ransomware history, today's threat actors are getting through the security walls with stolen passwords and credentials. What types of threat intelligence tools the panel suggest? Fernando, Jim, you care to comment on the kind of threat intelligence tools that the companies can use?
I actually, when I saw the question posted, excuse me, when I saw the question posted, I actually posted a response. My answer is, again, I tend to go with simple solutions. Second factor authentication is the strongest and most effective countermeasure for harvested credentials. So no organization should have access to anything that's remotely critical without securing it with second factor authentication. It's the least expensive and most effective way to achieve that objective. Having said that, I'm not answering the exact question. And so if somebody wants to talk about other technical solutions, by all means, but thank you, Sanjay.
Jim.
And I'll add a little to that. The multi-factor is great. And I think you have to, though, as I said at the top of the presentation that I gave, understand the full array of threat actors and what they're doing and how they're getting in. So the simplest is an insider. They're the ones who have the multi-factor. So I think you have to make sure that you're spreading out, chipping away at the bad actors, keep the bad actors who are outside. Multi-factor is good. I really like, a lot of our customers have been using the MITRE ATT&CK framework to look at the mechanisms and adapting the controls that they're looking for that help them define those bad actors. And then ultimately, again, having the ability to recover. So assuming they're going to be successful here and there, how do you ensure that you have that recovery capability? You've got to do it all. I know it's not easy, but it's just where we are with the sophistication of those attackers.
Thanks, Jim.
They're asking for threat intelligence tools, Sanjay. I believe we gotta do some sort of help here. There are many threat intelligence feeds. I don't know if we got a tool that you can, your MSSPs, for instance, if you have a managed security service provider, they may be able to provide some sort of threat management feed. But when it comes to tools, I always said, what is your business need and what problem you're trying to solve? I don't think the technology today is one size fits all. So it will be interesting to know what exactly is the problem and you're trying to solve to determine what that. But I'm gonna continue my speech by saying, back to basics, layer security approach, common sense, passwords are set to die. Let's use two-factor authentication and layer the security as best as you can and monitor. Monitor for indicators of compromise, et cetera, et cetera. I can be here all day, but not knowing exactly what the question, some context, this could go anywhere. This answer could go anywhere you want. So
yeah, I guess threat intelligence, there are a number of sources. CERT is providing threat intelligence. ISAC, healthcare ISAC is providing threat intelligence. Different vendors, right? Dell cybersecurity team, every vendor cybersecurity team is providing threat intelligence feeds that can be taken into your MSSP, that can be taken into whatever MDR, EDR tool that you're using. So I think, what Mauricio said, it's a pretty broad question and the answer is very broad. So please reach out either on chat or one-on-one if you have specific question, and we'll be more than happy to answer. There is one very simple question, and this is mainly for the HIMSS, for Grant, for Oscar or Kendall, if you guys are there. What is the benefit of joining HIMSS?
That's a fantastic question. I'll answer it. The benefit of joining HIMSS is exactly what you're seeing here today, that you can bring together different people from different walks of life within the healthcare community that are centered around healthcare informatics, IT of itself, and just really an end user of technology within the healthcare framework, and bring them together and have meaningful conversations. If you've ever been to a HIMSS event, we have them nationally. They're attended by people that are from international scope, about 50 to 60,000 people. You're part of a family that has common interests and common goals to be able to truly understand what was happening in the healthcare delivery model of itself. And when you have something like what just happened with COVID-19, this is huge. And because we have technology, we're having a platform today, and we have these commonalities around security. What does that look like? Around virtual platforms, what does that look like? You've seen telehealth take off. If we did not have our community today, we would not be as far ahead as we would be. So being a part of HIMSS was, right now, we've got about 1,600 to 1,700 members just within South Florida. You're a part of a family in which we can now communicate on different levels to help all of us to become better as a community, to actually improve the delivery of healthcare community-wide. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very good. Yeah, Victor, do you want to add something?
No, this is Oscar. I just said, well, great job, Grant. I think you described
Awesome.
it very well.
Thank
You know, again, being part of South Florida HIMSS is something that, you know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can all learn from each other and share stories and continue to, you know, be continual learners. So it's a great group. It's a great community, and I highly encourage folks to join if you haven't, and tell your friends about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If there are no other questions, I want to thank Charisse, Fernando, Mauricio, Jim for participating and for sharing their wisdom, Grant and Oscar, Kendall, Vanessa for putting the platform together. Grant, I'm going to hand it back to you to do the wrap up.
Well, thank you, Sanjay, very, very much for being the moderator. You have also been very, very influential in the community when it comes to awareness around healthcare and around security and what we need to do from a HIPAA compliance. So thank you very much for that. But that said, we're going to have another event. It will probably take place in November, December. Very hot topic around digital transformation. Look out for that. We encourage our entire audience, those that are live and those that will be on the recording. This is a recorded session that will be sent out to all of our attendees and members. So we encourage you to join us again in the next month or so. Until then, have a great week.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. Stay safe.
Thank
Thank you.